All right. Alex, Catherine, do you think we should wait a minute or two more, or should we get going?
Are we waiting on like 9 more registered?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, if folks who are already here want to give them 90 more seconds, we can.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, I think we'll get started. We are recording, right? Yep.
Yep.
So we will have this available on our website, MSPS's website, later too for reference as well. But thank you for joining us this morning. Oh, looks like we got one more. And today we're going to talk about the land survey camp that we have coming up. Oops. Oh man, I already messed it up. Oh wait, no, I didn't. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know which screen I'm looking at here. So, all right. So today I'll be presenting with Alex and Catherine, and I'll just introduce myself a little bit here. I am the chairperson for the Public Relations Committee for MSPS, and also have been working on this camp with Alex and Catherine and others, and really looking forward to seeing how this camp goes this summer. Alex, Catherine, would you like to introduce yourselves and maybe share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I'm Alex Miller. I'm an instructor at Dunwoody. I teach in their surveying and civil engineering program. I will be kind of leading this from Dunwoody's perspective, so helping arrange equipment and logistics here on campus.
Cool. I'm Katherine Stearns, and I am a graduate surveyor at Bolton and Mink. And Virginia and I met for the first time at the Girl Scout Power Week, who all these fun little pictures are from, and have kind of been chatting about opportunities to introduce land surveying to kids, but also into educational settings since then. So we're excited to work on this. And in addition to surveying, I definitely grew up camp counseling and working with kids. So I bring the summer camp counselor mindset to it as well.
Thank you, Alex and Catherine. Before we get started into all the details, I do want to recognize the folks that helped put this camp together and have been working on it. So in addition to Catherine and Alex, Michael Nelson, Dan Phil, Heather Gay, Chris Mavis, and Nicole Dimmick all contributed to this presentation, creating of the camp. So I want to say thank you again to everyone who's been a part of creating this camp. And if you hold on a second. Sorry. So leading up to the camp, the past 6 months is really how long we've been working on putting this camp together. And originally we started with this goal of the camp being a camp that number one is going to promote land surveying to the youth, a specific age range, which we will identify later, but to to offer basically like a career option for kids as they start making those decisions. And the second goal of this camp was to make it so that it's something that is that we can duplicate in other communities. So it's not just something that, you know, we can only host here in the Twin Cities at Dunwoody, but we wanted to create a camp program that, like, maybe, you know, chapter 2 or chapter 4 might want to host in their area, or any group of surveyors in the state of Minnesota, or anywhere for that matter. So that was those were the two main objectives in this putting this camp together. And during that process of creating the camp, it was important for us to identify who the camper was going to be. We looked at different age ranges where we thought we might be able to make the best impression on campers. And based on our research, you know, high schoolers kind of already know what they want to do. Grade school, elementary kids, you know, they're maybe a little too young to make those decisions yet. So we thought we would target the middle school range, that 6th to 8th grade level of education. So middle schoolers are the camper that we've identified. And then we started creating a draft of what that camp activity looked like. So once we knew who our audience was, it was easier for us to identify what activities would be age appropriate, and how those activities would flow from one activity to another. And with all of that, we spent some time identifying our expenses and registration fees. What things did we want to kind of have the camper take home with them, whether it was small pieces of equipment in terms of like a ruler or a mini drone or something like that. You know, what are we feeding them? Are we providing beverages? All of those types of things that cost money to host a camp, we spent time thinking about. And then also looking at our volunteer needs. And this is really kind of where we identified how many campers we could support in this camp based on how many volunteers we thought we needed for the camp. And we wanted to make the volunteer requirement of this camp scalable as well. So if there's, you know, a group of people that wanted to host this camp in their area, but maybe they didn't have as many volunteers, or maybe they had more, we wanted to be able to design this camp so it was, you know, scalable in that way. And then finally, in November and December is really where we spent a lot of time on all of these items that you're seeing listed on the slide. And that helped us be able to finalize our memo of understanding between Dunwoody and MSPS. So we identified who was responsible for what. And then during the November and January board meetings, we presented the camp and received approval from MSPS on the MOU, and now we're moving forward. So that was quite an accomplishment, and I'm very thankful for everyone on the committee that was available to you know, spend some of their time over the holidays getting this to a point where we are now. And if you haven't clicked on the link that was in the invite for the webinar, this is what our flyer looks like for the camp. Dunwoody's marketing group put this together for us. So definitely check that out and share it with as many people as you know. And then here are just some of the details about the camp registration. Like I mentioned before, we are targeting middle school students, grades 6 through 8. The camp is scheduled to be hosted in mid-July, the 15th through the 17th, and the campers are going to arrive at 9 o'clock and then leave the camp at 3 o'clock. So this is a day camp. It's not an overnight camp, and it's a 3-day camp. And it is going to be hosted at Dunwoody this summer, and we identified a cost of $275 for the camp, which after doing a little bit of research, we have determined that it's in terms of camp for 3 days, um, it's kind of in the middle there. It's not an expensive camp compared to others. So we're hoping that is an attractive part to get parents to register their kids. Also, part of that registration is going to include the lunch, snack, water, and then we have, like a mini drone exercise that we're doing on the last day where they'll be able to build and take that mini drone home with them. And then over the course of the 3 days, Katherine and Alex will talk about this more. They'll be collecting like survey tools, so to speak, to have in their bag, and they'll be able to take those home with them too. So for this summer and to test out this camp, because this is kind of a pilot project for us to make sure this, goes well, we decided that the camp would be limited to 24 campers. And we've designed it so that campers will be paired in crews of 2, and 2 crews will make 1 group, making 6 groups total. So you can kind of see where that scalability comes into play. Yeah, so I think that's all I have on that one. And next, I'm going to pass it over to Katherine, and she's going to talk about how you can help.
Okay, great. So this is the part where we sort of ask you guys to participate and also ask you to, spread the word to others who might be interested in volunteering at something like this. We have designed a couple of different volunteer opportunities to sort of meet people where they might be A, comfortable with kids, B, have the time, and C, feel like their technical or previous experience matches up with a volunteer role. So Alex has kindly agreed to be our benevolent camp director. So we have an overall leader for the camp, but then we also have a lot of leadership roles within the smaller groups. So as Virginia prefaced, we're dividing all of the campers up into crews of 2 and then groups of 2 crews, so 4 kids total. And we really wanted it to be a very hands-on and learning rich environment, and that means having a high ratio of adults to campers. So for each of those groups, we would like to have 2 volunteers, one being a technical leader, and this is the person who has a strong background in surveying, who feels comfortable demonstrating survey principles, who feels comfortable communicating survey principles, and who is available to spend a little time learning the activities that we have prepared for the campers and figuring out how to actually teach those and communicate those. So this is very much a role for a volunteer who feels comfortable teaching and who feels comfortable teaching surveying specifically. Now, of course, it's to middle schoolers, so we're not asking them to, compute traverses by hand or anything like that. It's going to be much more basic principles, which we'll go into in the breakdown of the days. Anybody who has worked on a field crew or worked in an office for a couple of years would probably feel comfortable doing this. But, there is that preface that both communicating and communicating to kids these survey principles would be an important part of this volunteer role. This would be a role that you could choose to do just for one of the 3 days or for all 3 of the days. Of course, we would love to encourage continuity. So anybody who wants to be there for all 3 days, awesome. But we also get that people have jobs, people can't necessarily take 3 days from them. So this is a role where if you just wanted to volunteer for one of those days, or if later when we go through the activities, one of the days really calls to you based on your particular professional interests, that's great. Also within each group, we want to have a volunteer who's more of a camp experience leader. And this person is there really to, check in on the kids, make sure they're having a good time, make sure they're connecting with things, and also to provide support to that group technical leader on the actual activities. So this is a great role for somebody who has experience with kids, has kids themselves. Also great if you have a strong survey background. I mean, that's awesome as well. But this would also be a really good opportunity for college students potentially who are also maybe interested in the field, because that could give them an opportunity to meet with professionals who are the technical leaders or get plugged in and make connections with other folks in the industry. So this is a really good volunteer opportunity, both for more people with more survey experience and maybe people with a little less survey experience who might not feel quite as comfortable doing the technical leadership, but feel really great about just working with people and being in that education learning environment. For this one, for this volunteer role, we really would love people to be able to commit to all 3 days. And that's really for the experience of the campers, to get to have the same faces every morning and to get to have somebody that maybe by, middle of day 2 or whatever, they feel comfortable talking to a little. Those connections are really important for kids too, in terms of the overall experience and how it imprints on them. So ideally, we would love to have in that role somebody who is available to volunteer for all 3 of those days. Now, the nice thing about that role is, even though it's maybe we're asking for a little more of a time commitment on the actual days of camp, it's a lot less preparation in advance. You wouldn't need to learn all of the technical activities. You wouldn't necessarily need to be prepared with the project materials, which would be more on the technical leader. You're really there for the camper experience. So maybe more of a commitment during camp, but a little less preparation in advance. And then we will also be looking for first aid volunteers. This again is a scalable commitment in terms of days. If there's one first aid certified person who reaches out to us and is like, hey, I want to be here all 3 days, I love it, that's great. But we also know that, one day it makes more sense to a lot of people. And so that's something where we could have a different kind of safety officer or first aid chief for each day. And that will just be the point person for health and safety for everyone at the camp. And then ideally, if there's a willingness there to sort of also play a support role in terms of helping out where help out needs to happen. But the primary focus, of course, there will be on health and safety for everyone. And then finally, we have one last sort of category of volunteer, and this is the sort of least amount of commitment overall in terms of time. It is to volunteer with the Equipment Expo section of our day 1. And that is a little kind of expo fair that we'll be holding, and I'll talk about more in just a second. But basically, we'd be looking for volunteers who would like to come and present a material part of surveying to the campers. So the hydrography modeling sandbox, I forget exactly what they call, but the sandbox where you model rainfall and hydrography, a survey truck, a total station, even an old-fashioned level and rod, anything like that, where if you have a piece of equipment that you feel really confident about demonstrating, if you wanted to come in for a couple of hours on that first day of camp, the 15th, and demonstrate that equipment and let kids interact with it, that would be the volunteer role that's for the Equipment Expo. So with those covered, does anyone have any questions right away before we move on into the day breakdown about those volunteering roles? Feel free to unmute yourself if you have any. Nobody? Okay, cool. Well, then we can, if you want to move on to the next slide here, we can go to the first day of the camp schedule. And so for this first day, obviously there'll be a certain amount of welcome and check-in. Our icebreaker for the day is going to include getting initial supplies out to campers, and doing introductions and having them do a couple of little activities where they sort of organize and sort themselves based on different kind of questions about themselves. Just get them talking to each other, not super, survey related for the first 30 minutes where we're kind of just organizing. But then we're also going to give them a fun little survey trivia icebreaker where we have them just guess a distance based on whatever parameters they want to try and guess distances, and place a marker in the ground. And then we'll return to that later in the day once we've taught them pacing and some other ways to measure distance, and sort of check their initial sort of instinct on how to measure a distance just in the field. And then we have a couple more activities for that day. So the first, I guess I should preface by saying that overall, over the total 3 days, our goal is to give them more or less a survey site, which will be on the Dunwoody campus, and to let them go through the process that a lot of us would go through when we're working on a project, which is establishing a boundary, locating monuments, and then doing some amount of topographic surveying and to identify like the existing conditions within our site, and then doing a little bit of modeling and designing in terms of what could fit onto that site and the logistics of how things would fit onto that site. So that is the overall for the full 3 days, sort of the way we've structured the camp, is giving them this sort of imaginary survey project in real space and letting them take real measurements of that real space in ways that we would. So for the beginning, we will have them start to learn about the notion of boundaries and corners and how we would set ties. So our first activity will be letting them go in their groups to corners that we've preset and using a compass and pacing, learning how to set ties to objects, or to let them set ties to things in ground that they can pace to and establish a bearing to. And then we'll also let them at that point introduce them to the notion of GPS and shooting locations, but we won't actually go to hands-on GPS activities until the afternoon. And then we'll move to a lunch break, give them some time. When we come back, we'll start working with the GPS and working on elevations and contours. And so we have a couple of activities within that as well, where we'll have some folks working with actual GPS units, and we'll have some folks working with CAD and getting an introduction to that program as well. It's all going to be very basic things, having them shoot spot elevations, bringing those into CAD, and letting them kind of look at how that's represented, and potentially, depending on level of comfort that campers have, drawing a little surface within CAD and understanding how those elevations tie together. We also have a few activities planned around learning contours that are more like games, kind of a gamification of contours, where we'll have campers, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we'll have campers basically play games that introduce the idea of how elevations tie together to form contours. So that will be a lot of the learning and instructional period of the day. And then at the end of this day, we'll also have the equipment expo going. And that's meant to be more of like an open fair type activity, where we will have stations set up with the different equipment and let campers move a little more freely between those different stations and learn about what most interests them. So if they see someone with a survey truck and they're just like, oh, this is so cool, I want to go check out this truck, they can spend time over there chatting with whoever truck it is and learning all the different stuff, seeing whatever custom box they have built out in the back, all that kind of fun stuff. Or if they're just, totally about the robot and they see the total station, they're like, that's what I'm interested in, then they can go chat to that person and learn about the total station. So this, again, is where that volunteer for the equipment expo would come in, where you're just kind of staying with your equipment. You're letting campers come up to you, you're answering their questions, you're letting them potentially touch the equipment. So think about that in terms of what you're bringing with you and if it's okay with your company or whoever owns the equipment. But they're middle schoolers, so it's not like a 5-year-old with jam hands situation. But that's where you're letting kind of the campers just come to you, and you're sort of meeting them where they are and answering their questions. So if you are interested in that volunteer role and you would like to prepare a little spiel or have a little handout or anything like that, that's awesome. That's totally great. And I'm sure, Virginia and the planning committee could support you in getting, if you just need something printed, we can support you in getting those materials. But definitely don't feel the need to have like instructional material prepared if you are interested in that equipment expo volunteer role. So I think that kind of brings us to the end of day one. I'm going to stop myself from going too far into each individual activity, because of course we've got pages and pages, but suffice to say that if you are the technical expert or the technical leader, you will be leading these activities in corner or monument location, ties, GPS, spot elevation shooting, bringing spot elevations into CAD, creating a surface. So these are these basic skills that you should feel comfortable and confident on if you wanted to be the technical leader for the camp that day. And then again, if you were interested in being the camp experience leader, just more comfort with being that point person for the campers personally, and supporting the technical leader in terms of keeping kids involved, checking in with them, answering their questions, helping them physically manipulate the materials that they'd be using. So I will pass it off to Alex, who's going to chat through the next 2 days.
Yeah, so day 2 is going to start in a similar way. We're going to have our, camper check-in and arrival first thing in the morning. We are going to ask for all 3 of these days that volunteers show up, around 8 o'clock, between 8 and 8:30, just to make sure that we can go through any setup and orientation needed for folks who are only going to be there for an individual day. But the campers were anticipating arriving between 8:30 and 9. So we will have some little filler activities each day just to make sure that campers who get dropped off early for whatever reason have something to do while they're waiting. Our first activity for day 2 is going to be kind of a tie monument hunt activity. So we're going to provide campers with tie sheets. They're going to have to identify a search area, and then they're going to have to use the tie sheets to search for a series of about 5 monuments. We're going to adjust that depending on time and capacity. But the idea with this is that it's going to be a monument hunt, but also at each thing that they locate, there's going to be a clue that will help them identify the next thing on, and it's going to progress until they find what we're calling a final monument that they'll use to establish the limits of where they're going to be laying out their tiny house area. I also want to note here too, obviously best case scenario is it's like 75 degrees and partly sunny and we're outside for all this stuff. But if we're having a monsoon, or if it's 110 degrees or something, we do have a series of indoor alternatives planned for this. So this whole thing was designed to be modular in that sense as well. So we're hoping for great weather. We're hoping we're going to be outside, and we have contingencies in place if not. So yeah, they'll find these monuments using the tie sheets. They'll identify their tiny house construction area. Then we'll break for lunch and move into a series of base map and map scale activities. So this will tie into a lot of the stuff that we're working on day 1. So they'll be set up someplace inside where we can get some table space and get the groups together. And we'll work on basically drawing in the boundaries based on the monuments they found for their areas. We'll do some simple contour mapping activity for their base maps, some shaded contour things. We'll talk about map scales, kind of demonstrate how the size of something on a piece of paper correlates to the actual size of something on the ground. And then we'll set them up to start laying out their little tiny houses within the construction area that they've defined. So with many of these activities, there's going to be a certain amount of prep here so that we can keep things moving through. So that's part of what I will be working on with our facilities and equipment and things at Dunwoody, is just making sure that everything is poised to flow seamlessly from one thing to the next. So while they're doing this layout and mapping activity, we're going to have some like laser scanning activities going on at the same time that they can rotate through. So if a group needs a break from an activity, they can move through the laser scanning station, kind of see how that works. Again, we'll have some scans running, and we'll also have some data already prepared so that we can show them the scanning process and bring them right inside and get them in front of a computer and see the point cloud and see what we can do with it. For day 3, again, we'll start kind of with the same pattern, simple filler activity until everybody gets together. And then our morning activity is going to be to start actually laying out the tiny house areas in the field. So we'll have a bunch of GPSs set up, some total stations, and they're going to mark and flag both the boundary of their layout site and the corner locations of the tiny houses themselves. Our plan is, as they're doing this, again, assuming we can be outside and everything goes as planned, that we'll have our drone out and we'll fly over each of the layout areas to gather some data so that we can demonstrate what we can do with the drone, show the kind of mapping potential associated with that, and then also give them a higher level, so to speak, view of what the site actually looks like from above. After lunch on day 3, we're going to do a presentation of everything that the campers have done for the previous couple days. So we'll set this up inside. We'll have some easel boards to put up maps. We'll display the flight data. We'll have each group kind of talk about their layout, their design, why they put things where they did, and kind of what their goals with that were. And again, we'll be presenting that drone imagery to kind of reinforce their actual paper mapping. And finally, the kind of closing activity before everybody heads out will be to build a little mini drone. We're going to get a pile of little drone kits and let the campers put them together, and then give them some time to fly them and take some pictures and have some fun with that before they get picked up. So that's kind of the high-level run through of each of these days. Does anybody have any specific questions about the schedule or the location or the activities? We have most of the equipment we're going to be using for the actual camp will be Dunwoody's equipment. So we've got a whole bunch of GNSS receivers and total stations, and we're going to be getting laptops from our IT department with our survey image on them. So we'll have access to CAD and some other things to let campers play around with it and kind of model things and see what all we do. We must have done a really good job if there are no questions.
So we will be hosting a to prepare for the camp. We are going to kind of test out all the exercises in May. If there are volunteers that are signed up at that time and they're curious to participate at that time, we will invite those people. But we do plan to kind of test this out to see how it goes, make any modifications, you know, if we're seeing something that might not flow very well together. And then we're also planning to have a volunteer orientation that will hold 1 week before the camp. And likely we'll have this online just to get everyone familiar with the schedule and the activities and what they'll specifically be doing. And we're asking that volunteers arrive at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is an hour before the camp starts, just to review assignments and get them comfortable with what they're going to be doing on that day of the camp. And then I don't have it on here, but following the camp, we're also going to do like a lessons learned and identify things that went really well, what didn't go so well, and modify that into our final basically template of the camp program, and get it to a point where we can publish it and make it available for anyone who would like to duplicate the camp in their community.
For the technical leader, just because I know this is a lot of information and it may seem very intimidating, but if you did volunteer as a technical leader, you would obviously be provided with, not like a script in terms of lines to say minute to minute, but with a full breakdown of each individual activity. It would not be on your responsibility to do any of the activity design or any of the material acquisition. All of that would be provided for you as the volunteer. And so you would have, a document resource to go back to as you were doing the activity, and materials to use as a resource. And obviously you would have Alex, and we are planning on having other members of the planning committee kind of floating in throughout the days, or potentially filling volunteer roles themselves. So definitely do not feel like you would be on an island on your own once you show up. If you were in that technical spot, there will be a really solid outline for each activity. And if you were interested in volunteering in the technical role, but you weren't really sure and you wanted to have like the full outline of the sort of play-by-play of activities, I'm sure that's something that Virginia or anyone else would be able to provide for you in advance of committing to the volunteer role, because we do have those longer documents drawn out that break things down kind of minute by minute, or piece by piece in each activity, which we're not going into in this moment because we don't want to bore you all to tears. But if that makes a difference for you, definitely reach out. And that's something that I think, Virginia, we're probably able to provide to folks if they're interested in looking through actual activity breakdowns before they volunteer.
I have a question. This is Evan Harris. So I assume a lot of the campers are going to be coming from like word of mouth. Are there other plans for, and sorry, maybe I missed this, but is there other ways to advertise and get the word out? And, has there been any interest so far? I know it's a little ways out, but just wondering about kind of recruiting and getting kids involved in the actual camp.
Good question, Evan. Dunwoody is offering their marketing services. We have, they'll be promoting it like they do with all of their camps. We've also reached out to the Future Cities competition organization and shared with them the information about the camp to all of the kids that participated in the Future Cities, which really covers, I think the 16 or 24, I can't remember which number it was, but there's a lot of middle schools around the Minneapolis metro area that compete in that competition. And they've all been sent this, the flyer and registration information as well. And I think a lot of it too will be word of mouth, trying to, promote it to our friends and people that we know in our community. And if we have any opportunities to get in a classroom or talk to teachers, we're going to do that this spring too, before the school year ends.
Was this promoted through the city of Minneapolis summer program too, or?
Not yet, but I know
Okay.
that there's I had sent it to Heather, but Chris Torito provided me a link of where a lot of camps in the metro area are posted to, and Heather was going to post the camp to that website as well. I think it was featured on the news a couple of weeks ago or something like that. Our local news station. So there should be some advertising there too. And if you have any suggestions on how to market this or advertise it, please let us know. If there's something we can do, we'd be happy to do that.
Virginia, do you know how many people we have registered already?
I don't know, but I think we have 2 for sure. And that's probably from Terry, I think, is what I heard. So we do have
I've got 2 boys, 6th and 8th grade, that will be attending for sure. I had, I guess, 2 questions, if you don't mind taking those, moving along, I guess. The first question is scholarship availability. So I know some of the other camps that my kids have attended, there's always a scholarship available for kids that can't necessarily afford the price of the camp. So is that something that you guys are investigating, or is that something that's out there and available, or does the city of Minneapolis provide anything like that, or some of the other school districts, I guess?
That's a good question, Terry. We did talk a lot about that and what our plans were going to be around that. At this time, we don't have a scholarship available. It's definitely something that we can look into, though, and I did mention that to the Future Cities group as well, when they said that they were going to promote it to their students, to let me know if there is interest, but you know, the cost of the camp is a barrier for them, to let me know. But yeah, that's something we don't have in place now, but I think it's something that we need to look at and figure out how we operate that.
And then the second question I had is just the advertisement and getting it out there known. So did you guys go to the Department of Education here in, I guess it's right over off of Snelling or Fairview and 36, just to promote it through their systems of the public schools?
No, but I'm going to now.
Okay, good. Because I think, and I don't quote me specifically, but I'm pretty sure that they have a summer camp lead worker over there. And I apologize for not knowing the actual person's title, but I think I dealt with them in the past and just had questions, and they were a good source of information for sure.
Cool. Yeah. I'll look that up, and if you happen to recall specifically who or where on that, feel free to share that information, and I'll make sure that we get this registered on their site.
I'll check an email if I come up with it again. It's been a couple of years, so the person might have changed, but I'll look into it again.
Cool. Thank you for the questions. Is there anything else? Any other questions or comments or anything we should know? Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Alex and Katherine for presenting. I really appreciate that, and we will have this presentation posted to our website so you can share it with other surveyors. I know there were a handful of folks that wanted to attend and couldn't, so we'll make sure that we have this available, and we'll send it out to membership too, so they can check it out and hopefully volunteer. So we're really excited and looking forward to this. We think it's going to be a great event for kids, and yeah, Can't wait until July. So, all right, well, thank you, everyone, and hope you have a good day.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.